Welcome back, guys. So many ROM sites are folding or have faced legal actions in one form or another, and many people are in fear due to this. Obviously, these are not end times for ROMs, but for some, it may definitely feel that way, especially with some people's favorite ROM sites being closed down or ceasing to offer downloads. Today, I want to dive into this a little bit, offer my feelings on ROMs and emulation, and just kind of the current, climate of news, what's going on out there. I just figured today's the day. Let's go ahead and speak on this a little further, dive into it. So without further ado, let's get this party started. So a lot of people are definitely very upset with Nintendo, and I can understand why. Nintendo does have every right to protect what they own. US copyright law is definitely in favor of this for the time being anyway. But these actions from Nintendo has been very heartbreaking for some. But seriously, let's forget about Nintendo's properties. I mean, really, who cares? We've had access to Super Mario Bros. On the NES many times over the years in some form or another. And most other classic titles from them as well. So it's kind of, not really the point I want to discuss. But what about all the other games that were run on Nintendo platforms that there may never be re-releases from? Games whose owners don't care about the properties, or companies who just don't exist any longer. What about those games? What about the numerous other legacy consoles and games Nintendo had nothing to do with? It's not all about Nintendo. There's so much more out there. So really, what's going on with all that? I've had several followers and subscribers ask me what my feelings are about an article from Kotaku called "In Defense of ROMs, a Solution to Dying Games and Broken Copyright Laws." Now seriously, I'm not much a fan of Kotaku, for one reason or another. We're not really going to jump into that right now, but I did go ahead and read the article. And this article makes a lot of very interesting points. They talk about how copyright law has actually harmed preserving some forms of media, such as movies. Movies that would be entering into the public domain shortly and have forever been lost. How other forms of media who face pirating issues found better ways to distribute and allow people to consume the work, such as music. This article really got me thinking about things with gaming, ROMs, and emulation, the current situation going on out there. And if you want to read this article for yourself, I'll put a link in the description so you can peep it out. It does have a lot of interesting points and cool information, so it's definitely worth a read. Most games will always be preserved due to ROMs, and that is definitely a great thing for sure. The Internet Archive has a huge catalog of old games, and they have a DMCA exemption for educational and archival purposes. As long as they intend to archive for educational and preservation reasons and not for profit, they're able to operate as they do. So this is in part due to the Library of Congress making several exemptions to the anti-circumvention clause of the DMCA, in which one of these exemptions could be looked at as being in favor of ROMs, at least in my eyes anyway, and plenty of others as well. So to take a look at that exemption, let's go ahead and read that. So this is the third one that they added, and this was, some years ago. Computer programs and video games distributed in formats that have become obsolete and which require the original media or hardware as a condition of access. A format shall be considered obsolete if the machine or system necessary to render perceptible a work stored in that format is no longer manufactured or is no longer reasonably available in the commercial marketplace. So what do you feel about that exemption clause? What about our right to educational purposes of revisiting history of gaming by playing games we no longer have access to, or cannot have reasonable access to due to an outrageous collector-run market of overpriced prized games? Seriously. So many damn games out there that are selling for hundreds, thousands of dollars that we will never be able to play. Not in the legal format anyway. So games that require specific obsolete technology that's not easily available or affordable should be protected for all. Now, I don't care about Nintendo's IPs, but the pressure people are feeling from Nintendo may definitely harm access to other forever lost or forgotten games, and I don't think that is fair. I mean, I do care about Nintendo's IPs, but it seems like they got that covered, so the world is not just Nintendo, obviously. There's so much more out there to worry about, to be concerned about. So, forget Nintendo. Seriously. Several of these ROM sites have either ceased operation or moved operations for one reason or another. Be it the current legal situation going on for others in the news, or just the original site creators wanting to move on to other things. The Love ROMs and Love Retro websites were a different situation altogether, though. It's a little different than the ISO zone and Emu Paradise. The owner of these sites, the Love ROMs and Love Retro sites, they were infringing on Nintendo's trademarks and copyright, not only by hosting their games, but by using Nintendo-owned images to advertise, promote, design the website, and profit as well. So due to this, it appears Nintendo targeted them specifically. I've seen other sites targeted by Nintendo by orders of cease and desist to remove their games, but those sites, they weren't profiting from Nintendo's IPs or images. They weren't promoting anything using, Super Mario and Nintendo's logos. The $100 million lawsuit against, these websites definitely changed a lot of people's thoughts on running ROM sites hosting Nintendo games, especially ones ran in countries where Nintendo would have no problem pursuing legal action in. But I seriously don't think this is the end of the world. It's not. One ROM site owner screwed up and put fear into others because of this crazy amount of money they potentially could lose and be awarded to Nintendo in this lawsuit. I don't know the actual finances of this individual, so who knows if he can actually afford to pay if this lawsuit does, go in Nintendo's favor and those damages are awarded. Don't know how that's going to work out, but, this definitely changes things for sure. Doesn't remove all access to ROMs forever, though. You just have to look a little harder or find other ways to acquire them, is all. It's not the end of the world. In the end, I hope ROM preservation stays a priority among the community, the gaming community, despite all this craziness. I don't see issue with someone wanting to revisit the past from 30 plus years ago via ROMs and emulation. If it's a recently released title for a current gen system, for sure, I don't feel it is fair to take those games without paying. That's my personal view, my personal opinion. If you don't think the same, it doesn't matter to me one way or another. I don't care. But that's just my personal view. I, like to support game companies that put out good products. Support them because I want to see them continue doing the same thing. That's current gen. That's stuff coming out now. That's just the way I look at it myself. With old stuff, I've downloaded and played many ROMs over the years, but really they were the ones that were on the obsolete hardware, and they're just not easily accessible for one reason or another. Sure, games get re-released or even remade, but the originals are the ones where the history lies, and the feels that I have for them remain. Sure, I can play the PSP or Game Boy Advance remake of Final Fantasy I, but I'll always appreciate the original on the NES as it was one of the first RPGs I played. What about younger generations who love Final Fantasy and started, in one of the later numbers? 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever, right? What if they'd like to revisit the original and learn where the series started, get the history, Emulation's a great way to learn that history. And hey, Nintendo actually seems to think so as well, because Final Fantasy was released on the NES Classic. But again, what about the games companies don't care to revisit or re-release? The only access most will have is via emulation, and is that wrong? I don't think so. Games are a relatively new form of media, but also we have so much restricted access to legal versions of gaming's past. Movies we kind of talked about a little earlier with the Kotaku article, and sure, there will be some examples of forever lost movies, but I feel we have a much easier way to access movies legally from 30, hell, even 60 plus years ago than we do for games that were released in the 80s and 90s. Movies and music have adapted to allow access to those who want to consume the media legally. Who buys music anymore? But how do you listen to your music? Via streaming services, YouTube, iTunes, Pandora, your movies? How do you get your movies? Probably pretty similar. Streaming services, whatever. Gaming's going in that direction of no longer supporting physical media, and for sure I'm not exactly ready for that. But there will be a time when it happens. But in the meantime, let's just enjoy our games. New, old, current generation, retro, whatever you want to call it. Let's just have fun. Seriously, it's not worth the stress. Enjoy what we have. Let's continue building an awesome community of gamers who appreciate the history of the gaming industry. I mean, it really means a lot to me. A lot of people love games. A lot of people nowadays still, they love to play these games from years and years ago. It's just something. It's passion. It means something to people. We got to have access to this. It's history. We learn history in school. Be it, one version of history or another. Do we want gaming's history to be lost? I don't. I want access to this stuff, and the industry's definitely got to make some changes and figure this out one way or another. We can't have stuff going lost and just never having access to. But hey, I really do appreciate you guys stopping in. Share your comments on this situation, on this topic. I really want to hear what you guys got to say. You guys sat through this video, listened to what I had to say. Now I want to hear what you guys got to say. So drop that comment down below. Smash that like button, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, do all that cool stuff. It means the world to me, it really does, and it helps me continue doing what I am doing. So with that said, guys, I will catch y'all next time. Peace out, bye-bye, and boom!